The wind dragged dust across the abandoned road, carrying with it the smell of smoke and old death. No bells rang, no dogs barked, only the creak of a rope swaying from the crooked beam of the gallows. Beneath it stood Clara Whitlow, her swollen belly pressing against the torn fabric of her dress, wrists bound so tight the skin had split. She was 8 months heavy, close to breaking, but the men of Dry Creek had decided her time was over. They said she had helped her husband steal rifles from the federal stockade, that she had hidden him in the hills after the raid. They called him an outlaw, and by extension, called her guilty. Clara lifted her chin, the bruise on her jaw, dark against pale skin, and looked straight into the eyes of the marshal who had condemned her. Marshal Brayton leaned against the porch post, boots planted wide, his hands crossed over a broad chest that had never known hunger. His eyes were flat, his jaw chewed a piece of straw, as if the scene before him was no more than livestock being branded. "Justice don't wait for babies," he muttered, and the crowd murmured agreement, or at least didn't dare object. A deputy shifted nervously, hat in hand. "Sir, the law says," Brayton cut him off with a glare that snapped like a whip. "The law says she hangs." Clara's lips split into the faintest smile, not out of defiance but out of something older, heavier, a tired kind of courage. "My husband never stole," she said, voice low but steady. "He fed the people you turned away. He gave bread to widows, water to children. You call that treason because it makes you look small." Brayton spat into the dust and signaled the hangman. The rope dropped. The barrel scraped against the boards as it was kicked forward. Clara closed her eyes, one hand twitching against the rope that bound her wrists, imagining the child inside her would at least know she had stood tall. The hangman looped the noose around her neck. The silence was so deep it seemed the whole town had been swallowed by the desert. Then came the sound that split the stillness, the hiss of an arrow. It struck the gallows post inches from the hangman's hand. Wood splintered. Gasps tore through the crowd. Before anyone could shout, a second arrow sliced the air and shattered the deputy's rifle into useless shards. Panic rippled like fire through dry grass. Men dove for cover. Women screamed. The marshal cursed and drew his pistol. From the rooftops, a figure dropped like a shadow. He rolled in the dirt rows with a tomahawk glinting in one hand and a bow in the other. Tall, lean, his skin painted with lines of ash. His hair bound in a black braid that lashed across his shoulders. His eyes burned not with rage but with a cold precision that froze the square. He moved like wind over stone, silent, unstoppable. The word rippled through the terrified crowd, Comanche. Before the hangman could react, the warrior vaulted the platform. In one motion, he slashed the rope from Clara's wrists. In the next, the noose fell limp to the floorboards. She staggered, but his arm was already there, strung across her back. "Can you walk?" His voice was gravel, harsh, steady. She barely breathed. "Who?" But another gunshot cracked the air, and the warrior pulled her close, his body shielding hers as they leapt from the gallows into the dirt. A black stallion waited at the edge of the square, nostrils flaring, hooves striking sparks from stone. The warrior lifted Clara as if she weighed nothing, set her across the saddle with one hand, cradling her belly, and swung up behind her. The crowd scattered, bullets snapped in the wind, but the stallion was already moving, tearing down the street, carrying them into the hills before the law could even reload. Clara clutched at the horse's mane, the child in her belly kicking against the chaos, her mind spinning between fear and disbelief. The warrior did not look back. His arms anchored her against him, every breath steady, even as death whistled past them in lead and smoke. Only when the town was a smudge on the horizon did he slow, guiding the stallion through narrow gullies, across dry creek beds, and into the shelter of stone where the wind howled but no eyes could follow. When at last he dismounted, he lowered her gently, letting her lean against a rock as if she were made of glass. Her knees buckled, her throat burned where the rope had scraped, her wrists throbbed raw. The warrior gave her a water skin. She drank, then met his gaze for the first time. His eyes were dark, carved deep with sorrow that words could not name. "Why?" she asked, voice hoarse. He struck flint to moss, coaxing flame into life. "Seen enough gallows," he said simply. "One more's too many." The firelight caught the lines of paint across his cheekbones, the curve of scars that marked battles fought long before she had ever heard his name. And in that hidden hollow with death left behind in Dry Creek, Clara felt something stir that she had not known in months, not hope exactly. Not yet, but the raw edge of survival turning slowly toward life. The hollow where they stopped was little more than a pocket of stone cut into the hillside, half hidden by scrub brush and shadows. Clara sat hunched near the fire, pulling the blanket the warrior had given her tighter around her shoulders. Every breath stung her ribs, every shift of weight made her womb clench. She feared the child might come too soon here in the wilderness, where there was no midwife, no bed, no safety. The warrior crouched nearby, sharpening his blade with slow, deliberate strokes, his eyes never still, always scanning the ridgeline, as if the darkness itself might lunge. The silence stretched long. Finally, Clara whispered, "My name is Clara Whitlow." She expected nothing in return. He gave her nothing at first, only the rasp of stone against steel. Then after a pause, he said, "Nakai." She frowned. "That's your name?" He nodded once. The syllables felt foreign, heavy on her tongue, but real. She tucked it into memory like a secret. The fire cracked, throwing sparks that died before touching the ground. Clara shifted the rope burns at her wrists raw and open. Nakai noticed. Without a word, he tore a strip of hide from his satchel, dipped it in water, and wrapped her wounds with surprising gentleness. His hands were rough-scarred but steady. Clara swallowed against the lump in her throat. She wanted to ask why he had risked himself, why he hadn't let the law finish its work. But when her lips parted, no sound came. Instead, she asked the only thing that mattered. "Will they follow us?" Nakai's eyes flicked to hers. Yes. The word landed like a stone in her gut. Clara felt the baby shift, pressing hard against her ribs. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of dread. "Then we'll never stop running," she murmured. "Running keeps you alive," Nakai replied. His voice carried no comfort, only fact. "Until you're ready to fight." They didn't speak again that night. Clara drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by the image of the noose, by the memory of her husband's last breath, by the cruel stare of Marshal Brayton. But each time she startled awake, Nakai was there, a shadow carved against the firelight, his bow across his lap, his tomahawk within reach. She realized then that he hadn't slept at all. Dawn came gray and brittle. They moved before the sun cleared the ridge. Nakai led the stallion by the reins while Clara stumbled along beside him, refusing to be carried though her legs ached. The wind cut sharp, carrying the distant echo of hooves. Clara's heart leapt. She turned to him, panic in her eyes. Nakai listened, head tilted. "Not close," he said, "but closer every day." They pressed on through gullies and dry creek beds until the sun stood high. Clara's strength faltered. Her ankles swelled. Her breath came ragged. Nakai finally lifted her onto the stallion, despite her weak protests. "Save your fire," he told her. "You'll need it." By midday, they reached a stream trickling between boulders. Nakai filled the water skin, then handed her a strip of jerky. Clara chewed slowly, her stomach rebelling, but hunger winning. After a long silence, she spoke. "They hanged him in front of me. My husband said he was a traitor, but he only took what the soldiers abandoned. Food, flour, coffee beans. Gave it to families who had nothing. They called it theft. They called it treason." Her voice broke, but no tears came. She had none left to give. Nakai sat across from her, eyes unreadable. Finally, he said, "Soldiers burned my winter camp. Killed my wife. My son." His tone was flat, stripped of feeling, as if the words had been worn smooth by years of repetition. Clara's breath caught. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was as if their griefs had recognized each other, two broken pieces fitting jaggedly together. That night they sheltered beneath a rock overhang. The wind howled like wolves, but Nakai built the fire low and tight, wrapping her in buffalo hide. Clara lay curled on her side, one hand on her belly, listening to the steady scrape of his knife against wood. She watched him from across the flames, his face a mask of stone, his body coiled like a bowstring, even in stillness. "Do you ever sleep?" she whispered. Nucky looked up, met her eyes, then returned to his carving. "Not when death is near." Her throat tightened. "Will it ever not be?" He didn't answer. But when she closed her eyes at last, she felt the weight of his presence beside her. And for the first time since the gallows, she let herself believe she might see another dawn. The third morning began with the restless stir of her unborn child, pressing low and urgent inside her. Clara woke with a gasp, sweat damp on her brow, the ache in her back sharp as a knife. Nakai was crouched by the embers of the fire, grinding bark into a powder, his bow never more than an arm's reach away. He noticed her shift the way her hand clutched her swollen belly, and his gaze sharpened. "Not yet," she whispered, shaking her head. "Please, not yet." Nakai didn't answer. He poured water into a small pot and dropped in the bark, letting it steep, the steam rising faintly. He handed the cup to her. "Drink. It eases the pain." The bitter taste clawed at her throat, but warmth spread slowly through her chest, dulling the edge of the cramps. Clara leaned against the rock wall, eyes heavy, watching him move. Every gesture was deliberate, practiced like a man who had lived too many nights on the edge of danger. They set out again before the sun crested the ridge. Nakai walked ahead, guiding the stallion, while Clara rode her body sore from the days of travel. Her wrists scabbed but healing. The air smelled of sage and dry stone. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed. For hours they traveled without words until Clara broke the silence. "You lost a wife. A son. How old was he?" Nakai's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed fixed on the trail. 5. Clara waited, but no more came. Then softly he said he thought he could fly. Climbed a log, leapt into the snow. Laughed all day when he fell. Nakai's voice faltered for the first time. They burned him where he slept. Clara's throat closed. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling her daughter move. "They called my husband a thief. He only tried to keep children alive. And for that, they took his breath." Nakai's eyes flicked to her, then away. "The world takes without asking. That is its way. And yet you saved me." He didn't respond, only adjusted the reins, urging the stallion up the incline. By midday, Clara could walk no more. Nakai found a hollow near a stream sheltered by cottonwoods. He gathered wood and struck flint while she sank to her knees, panting against the rough bark of a tree. The contractions were sharper now, clawing through her body with merciless rhythm. Panic clawed at her throat. "It's coming, too soon." Nicky crouched beside her, his eyes steady. "Then we prepare." He moved fast, cutting branches, laying hides on the ground, boiling water, grinding herbs. Clara clutched at the earth, her nails digging into soil, as another wave of pain tore through her. Tears blurred her vision. "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone." His voice was firm, final, like stone breaking. The hours blurred into agony. The sky turned bruised with storm clouds, lightning flashing on the horizon. Clara screamed into the buffalo hide, her body arching, muscles tearing with the force of life pushing through. Nakai knelt beside her, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Breathe," he told her. "I can't," she sobbed. "You can." Another contraction ripped through her. She cried out, clutching at his arm. Nakai held fast, unmoving. "This pain has a purpose. Let it come." Her world narrowed to fire and blood. The thunder outside roared like drums of war, the wind tearing through the trees. Clara thought she might break, that her body would tear apart. But then in a rush of agony, the child came. A cry split the storm. High, raw, defiant, a girl. Clara collapsed, sobbing, trembling as Nakai cut. The cord wiped the child clean and wrapped her in softened hide. He placed the bundle into her arms. Clara stared down at her daughter, tears flooding her eyes. "You're here," she whispered. "You're real." The baby whimpered once, then nestled against her chest, tiny breaths warm against her skin. Nakai sat back on his heels, blood still on his hands, his face unreadable. For the first time, Clara saw something shift in his eyes, something ancient and wounded, pausing in awe. The storm eased outside. The fire crackled low. And in that hidden grove, with death left behind and new life in her arms, Clara Whitlow knew she had survived more than the gallows. She had stepped through fire into something else. She looked at Nakai across the flames. "She doesn't have a name." Nakai's gaze flicked to the child, then away. His voice was quiet. "Ashani. It was my son's." Clara pressed her lips to her daughter's head. "Then she carries his strength." Nucky turned his face to the shadows, but not before she saw the tremor in his breath. The grove lay hushed in the hours after birth, a cocoon of stone and cottonwood, where the world seemed to hold its breath. Clara dozed in broken intervals, her daughter nestled against her chest, the warmth of the tiny body both anchor and burden. Every sound around her felt magnified, the rustle of leaves, the snap of embers, the scrape of Nakai's knife as he cleaned and sharpened it again. He moved with the same controlled precision he had shown through battle, through rescue, through blood. When Clara stirred awake in the gray before dawn, she found Nakai seated cross-legged near the dying fire. His bow lay across his lap, his tomahawk resting at his foot. His eyes were not closed, not even heavy with fatigue. They scanned the tree line, always searching, as if he expected the earth itself to rise up against them. Her voice was little more than a rasp. "Do you ever sleep?" His head turned slightly, the firelight catching the lines of ash still faintly marking his cheekbones. "Not when there's something worth guarding." Clara drew the blanket tighter, her wrists still raw beneath the bindings of hide he had wrapped days earlier. She shifted the baby, stirring, whimpering softly before settling again. "You're not going to kill me, are you?" she asked suddenly. The words tumbling out before she could stop them. Nakai's gaze held hers. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. Then he spoke flat and certain. "I don't kill women." Clara let out a sharp, breathless laugh. "That's a low bar." He didn't answer, only turned his eyes back to the darkness. Shame prickled her skin. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "That wasn't fair. You saved me. I don't even know why. You could have kept riding, let them do what they wanted." A long pause stretched between them. Then Nakai said, "I was in town, trading. I saw the gallows. I've seen too many." He offered no more, and Clara didn't press. Grief and silence clung to him like a second skin. She knew the shape of it well enough in herself. Morning arrived brittle and pale. They broke camp quickly, Nakai moving with relentless efficiency, Clara still weak but unwilling to be left behind. He asked no questions when she winced with every step, nor when she leaned heavily against the stallion as he lifted her into the saddle. His hands were firm, steady, never lingering longer than necessary. The trail wound through sage and stone-twisting gullies that carried them deeper into wilderness. Clara clutched her daughter against her chest, every jolt of the horse stabbing through her exhausted body. By midday, they reached a stream swollen from recent storms. Nakai crouched to cup water into his hands, offering it first to Clara, then filling his own flask. She sat on a flat rock, rocking the baby, gently, her mind tangled with memory and loss. Her voice broke the silence, low and brittle. "They hanged him in front of me. My husband said he was stealing from the Union, but he only took from abandoned trains, sacks of flour coffee jerky, gave it to starving families, widows freed slaves. They called it treason. They made me watch." Her eyes stayed fixed on the water, unblinking. "I thought they'd let me live. Thought they'd let me have this child." Nakai listened, face unreadable. When he spoke, it was quiet. The world names mercy weakness, and weakness is always punished. Clara's hand trembled on her daughter's back. "Then why fight at all? Why save me?" Nakai tore a strip of dried meat, handed half to her. "Because breathing alone is not living." His words sank into her chest like stones. She chewed the jerky slowly, her throat tight, and for the first time in weeks, the taste of food didn't turn to ash on her tongue. That night, they camped beneath a weathered bluff. The fire was small flames licking at scraps of wood. Clara nursed the baby, her body still broken, but her spirit pulled taut by a thread of fragile determination. Nakai sat across from her, carving a strip of riverwood into the shape of an animal she couldn't yet name. The wind keened through the canyon, carrying with it the memory of gallows and smoke. Clara whispered into the hush, "You look like a man with no one left to wait for." Nakai's knife paused, a silence so deep it roared between them. Then low, almost lost to the fire, he said, "A wife, a son." Her heart clenched. "What happened?" His eyes stayed on the wood in his hand. "Soldiers came, burned the camp, shot first." Clara pressed her lips against her baby's downy head, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Nakai only nodded, the muscles in his jaw tightening once before stilling. The baby whimpered in her sleep. Clara rocked her gently, murmuring nonsense words, letting the rhythm soothe both mother and child. Across the fire, Nakai sat unmoving, carved into silence as solid as the canyon walls around them. But beneath that silence, something new had begun to stir, something raw, dangerous, and alive. Clara felt it pulse through the darkness, through the firelight, through the fragile space between survival and hope. For the first time, she did not feel utterly alone. The days that followed blurred together, a fragile thread of movement and silence stretched across the wilderness. Clara's body ached with every step, her ankles swollen, her ribs tender, where the rope had cut her womb raw from the violence of birth. Yet each sunrise found her still alive, her daughter breathing softly in her arms, and Nakai always there. Part shadow, part sentinel, never far, never faltering. They moved at dawn and rested by midday, choosing hollows and gullies hidden from the open plain. Nakai scouted with the eyes of a hunter, reading tracks, tasting the wind, pausing when even birds went silent. Clara followed as best she could, cradling her baby trying to match his silence. She quickly learned he wasted no words. When he spoke, it mattered. On the fourth day, her legs buckled as they climbed a narrow ridge. Nakai caught her before she could fall, his arm firm across her back. Clara swallowed her pride. "I can't keep this pace," she whispered. Nakai studied her eyes, unreadable. Then he lifted her onto the stallion without comment, placed the infant in her lap, and walked beside them. His hand on the reins was steady as stone. That night, beneath a crescent moon, Clara nursed her child while Nakai cleaned a rabbit snared in the brush. The fire was low smoke curling blue against the dark. Clara broke the silence, her voice tired but probing. "What will you do with me when we stop running?" Nakai didn't look up. "Keep you alive, if you let me." She blinked. "Why, you don't even know me." He sliced the rabbit cleanly, the blade glinting in the firelight. "I know enough. You've lost. You've endured. You breathe when others would not. That is reason enough." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to demand more, but exhaustion drowned the words. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." The baby stirred, letting out a sharp cry that pierced the night. Clara rocked her gently, humming a tune half remembered from childhood. Nakai's hands stilled. He listened, the faintest flicker of something passing over his face. "What was her name?" Clara asked suddenly, her eyes on the flames. "Your wife." Nakai's jaw flexed. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then softly, "Anika." "And your boy." "Ashani," the name broke in his throat, but he forced it out. Clara pressed her lips to her daughter's hair. "Then she carries his spirit now. His name lives." Nakai's eyes flicked to the child, then back to the fire. He said nothing, but the silence between them felt less hollow. The following morning, clouds rolled in heavy and low. Rain lashed the earth, turning the gullies to rivers of mud. Nakai led them to the skeleton of an abandoned cabin, its roof half caved, but walls still standing against the storm. Inside, the air was damp, thick with rot, but it was shelter. Clara laid the baby on a pile of hides while Nakai worked to patch holes with branches and tarps from his pack. When the storm finally eased, the air smelled clean sharp with pine. Clara stepped outside, cradling her daughter, watching the sky break into pale blue. Nakai stood nearby, bow in hand, scanning the horizon. "You don't stop," she said quietly. "Can't," he replied. "Don't you ever want more than this?" He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "A home," she whispered. "A place where no one's hunting us. Where my daughter can grow without fear." Nucky looked back to the horizon. "Wanting don't change what is." Clara hugged her child closer. "Maybe not, but building might." His expression didn't change, but something in the way his shoulders shifted told her the words had struck deeper than he let on. That night, they lay in the dark cabin, no fire lit for fear of being seen. Clara lay curled around her daughter, whispering lullabies. She could feel Nakai across the room, awake, listening, always listening. And for the first time, she imagined not just surviving the next dawn, but reaching one where she could plant roots again. Hope was fragile, dangerous, but it was there. The storm left the land washed raw, the gullies swollen and the plains gleaming like hammered silver under the new sun. They broke camp before the mud had hardened, Clara clutching her daughter close beneath her shawl, while Nakai led the stallion carefully along the ridges. Silence clung between them, not hostile but weighted, filled with everything left unsaid. By midday, Clara's body screamed for rest. Her feet ached, her back burned. Her arms trembled with the constant weight of her child. Nakai guided them toward a line of cottonwoods by a slow-moving river. There in the shade, he finally allowed her to stop. Clara sank onto the grass, her daughter rooting against her breast, and for a while the only sounds were the gurgle of water and the soft suckling of the baby. Nakai crouched by the riverbank, washing the blood from his knife. His movements calm, precise. Clara watched him, her heart heavy. "You've carried me farther than I deserve," she whispered. His eyes lifted briefly. "Deserve has nothing to do with it." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion swallowed her words. Instead, she lay back against the trunk of a tree, staring at the branches above. Her daughter stirred, tiny fists curling, and Clara pressed a kiss to her downy head. They lingered there through the heat of the afternoon. But when the shadows grew long, Nakai stiffened. his head tilted listening. Clara followed his gaze and saw nothing but the empty line of horizon. Still, she felt her blood run cold. "Someone follows," he murmured. Her heart hammered. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. Bounty men." Clara's arms tightened around her child. "Marshal Brayton." Nakai shook his head. "Not yet. But word spreads. There is money on your name." Terror clawed at her throat. She whispered, "What do we do?" Nakai rose to his full height, his shadow stretching long across the grass. "We ride, until night swallows us." They moved fast, the stallion's hooves pounding the earth, wind tearing at Clara's hair. Every jolt sent pain lancing through her body, but she held her daughter tight and said nothing. Nakai rode like part of the horse itself, balanced unyielding eyes scanning the horizon with every stride. By dusk, the land split into a canyon, its walls rising jagged and red, a snake twisting across the earth. Nakai led them into its throat, the sound of hooves echoing off stone. Wind howled through the narrow pass, carrying dust and whispers. Clara shivered, clutching her child tighter. They stopped beneath an outcrop of stone, where the canyon widened into a sheltered hollow. Nakai dismounted first, then lifted Clara and the baby gently down. "We rest here," he said. Clara's legs trembled beneath her. She leaned against the stone her daughter swaddled close while Nakai built a small fire, its glow flickering against the canyon walls. After the baby was fed and asleep, Clara turned to him, her voice low. "Are you tired of saving me yet?" He stirred the fire with a stick. "Not yet." Her gaze lingered on him, the scars on his arms, the shadows etched into his face. "Then don't stop," she whispered. Something shifted in his eyes, something unspoken, heavy as stone. He looked at her, held her gaze longer than ever before, then turned back to the fire. "I can't offer you a home," he said at last. "I'm not asking for a house," Clara replied, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm asking if you'll keep walking beside me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of the fire. Nakai didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. That night, Clara lay curled around her daughter, the fire burning low, her body aching but her spirit restless. Across the flames, Nakai sat as always, bow across his lap, eyes on the shadows. But when she whispered into the stillness, "I'm not surviving anymore, Nakai. I'm living," she heard his voice come back, low and steady. "So am I." And for the first time, the canyon walls didn't feel like a prison. They felt like a beginning. The first light of dawn painted the canyon walls, gold soft beams spilling across the hollow where Clara and her daughter slept. Nakai was already awake, crouched by the fire pit, sharpening his blade with slow, deliberate strokes. He looked more like a sentinel carved from stone than a man, every sense attuned to the silence beyond the canyon. Clara stirred, her body stiff, her baby nestled against her chest. She blinked at him, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. Yet there was something else too, an ember of strength that hadn't been there before. "We can't keep running forever," she whispered. Nakai's eyes flicked to her. "No, we ride until we can't, then we stand." The thought chilled her. "And fight, if we must." His tone carried no boast, only fact. Clara looked down at her daughter. The baby stretched tiny fingers, gurgling softly. Fear rose in her throat, but alongside it came a strange calm. What if fighting gets her killed? Nakai's gaze lingered on the child. Then he said, "What if hiding does?" His words struck deep, leaving no easy answer. Clara pressed her lips to her daughter's head and closed her eyes, letting the silence stretch. They broke camp at first light, climbing higher along the canyon until it opened into a hidden valley, lush and green, as if the earth itself had been saving it for them. A stream cut through the meadow, glittering under the sun. Tall cottonwoods lined the banks, their branches reaching skyward like weary arms finally at rest. Nakai reined in the stallion at the ridge. Clara sat behind him, her daughter warm in her arms. When she saw the valley below, tears stung her eyes. "Is it safe?" she asked. "Nothing is safe," Nakai said quietly. Then after a pause, "But it's far, and it's quiet." Clara smiled faintly. "Then it's enough." They dismounted and walked into the meadow, their footsteps soft against the grass. The baby stirred but didn't cry, as if even she sensed the peace. Nakai built a small fire near the stream, while Clara knelt by the water, dipping her hands in the cold current, watching ripples dance around her reflection. Days bled into weeks. They built slowly, a lean-to of branches and hides, a cradle carved from juniper, a fire pit ringed with stones. Nakai hunted deer, set snares, taught Clara how to read the wind. Clara gathered berries, turned soil, and hummed lullabies by the fire. The baby, now named Ashani, grew stronger with each sunrise, her laughter echoing like bells across the valley. Nakai carved her toys from wood, a fox, a bird, a mother holding a child. Clara lined her cradle with wildflowers, saying softly, "She'll never remember the noose, only this." At night, they sat by the fire. Clara told stories of her garden back east of lavender that grew even in drought. Nakai told fewer stories, but when he did, they came like stones placed carefully in her palm. Solid grounding, never wasted. But peace never lasts on the frontier. One evening, Nakai returned from patrol with his jaw tight. "They're coming," he said. "Two riders, bounty men." Clara's heart lurched, but her hands didn't tremble. She wrapped Ashani close and began to pack their few belongings. Nakai watched her, something unreadable in his eyes. They rode east, deeper into the valley toward the canyon's far end, where cliffs rose high and the land narrowed into a hidden hollow. As the sun dipped low, Nakai dismounted, scanning the ridge. "Here," he said, "we make our stand." Clara's throat tightened. "You mean fight?" "If they don't turn back." The baby stirred, whimpering. Clara kissed her brow. Fear gnawed at her. But when she met Nakai's gaze, she found no panic there, only steadiness. Night fell. The riders came, shadows slipping through the canyon, guns glinting in the moonlight. They called out threats, promises of bounty, their voices echoing against stone. Nakai answered with silence. Clara held her breath, clutching Ashani close, every heartbeat like thunder in her chest. The first shot split the night. Nakai moved like shadow and flame, bow singing, blade flashing. Clara ducked behind stones, shielding her child. But when one rider crept close, she remembered the rifle Nakai had taught her to use. She raised it, breath steady, and fired. The man fell. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. The second rider fled into the night, his shouts fading into the wind. Clara's body shook, her knees weak, but she held her daughter tight, whispering, "We're here. We're alive." Nakai returned, blood on his hands, dirt on his face, but his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. He looked at her, then at the rifle in her grip, and gave a single nod of respect. When dawn broke, the valley was quiet again. Mist rose from the stream, curling through the grass. Ashani slept in her cradle, pink-cheeked and safe. Clara stood beside Nakai, watching the sun climb over the cliffs. "We can't run forever," she said softly. "Then we don't," he replied. "We build." She looked at him. The man who had cut her free from death, who had carried her through storms and blood, who had given her back not just life but purpose. "Together," she whispered. Nakai met her eyes. Together. And in that hidden valley with the earth scarred, but still giving, they began again. Not as fugitives, not as broken survivors, but as a family born from ash, from blood, from the stubborn fire of hope that refused to die.